I'm Rabbi Jen Queen. I'm the Director of Engagement and Reform Rabbi at Harvard Hillel and one of the Harvard Chaplains. And I am joined today, as always, by my co-host, Rachel. Do you want to introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Rachel Eichen. I'm the Multi-Faith Engagement Fellow based in the Memorial Church.
Amazing. And welcome back to Sustaining Practices for Perilous Times. So this is a series that features Harvard University chaplains, faculty, administrators, and staff offering insight into their personal spiritual practices. What's really special about this program is we're defining spiritual practice broadly, and we'll showcase a diverse array of multimodal practices from prayer to poetry, movement to mindfulness, cooking, and other creative outlets, anything that inspires, cultivates meaning, and provides emotional and spiritual sustenance, hope, energy, and courage to press forward during these very challenging times. And I will kick it over to Rachel to introduce our presenters for today.
Yes, we're so excited to have two wonderful presenters who are going to be sharing practices around the theme of gratitude. It feels very fitting for such a nice and beautiful day, at least here in Cambridge. Our first presenter will be Professor Matthew Potts, who's a professor at Harvard Divinity School, who I had the privilege of taking some classes from, so I'm super excited to get to learn from you again. And Dr. Tara Cousineau, who is works at the Harvard Counseling and Mental Health Services. So we're so excited to be bringing folks together from different parts of the university and to be talking about practices that sustain us. So I'll pass it over to Matt.
Great, thanks Rachel, thanks Jen, and thanks to you all for being here, for the invitation and for showing up. I've told this is supposed to be kind of short and sweet, and as Rachel knows, having taken class with me, I'm not always great at that, but I'll try to. she took me a preaching class with me in particular, so the timing was very, very important. So yeah, the theme this week is gratitude. Actually, I'm gonna focus more on maybe the corollary to gratitude, which is please and thank you is what I want to talk about. And I have a short slide, but it's basically just so I could have a short series of slides to share with you. But really, I just want to talk to you about what my primary spiritual practice has been. I mean, I have several, I walk the dog and I cook and these things. But in terms of prayer practice, I mean, if I could just basically where this prayer practice came from is my spiritual life collapsed about 2 years ago. About 2 years ago, right now, in all honesty, and it was just a very, very difficult time personally for me. Just relationships faltering, and someone I love very much very sick, and so these kinds of things just happened to us, and it happened to me, and I know it's happened to a lot of us during the pandemic, right? And I found myself, I've never been a super disciplined prayer. I'm an Episcopal priest, and I'm supposed to have a really robust prayer life, but it's actually kind of like everybody else, I think, sort of. Sometimes it's good and sometimes it's not, and sometimes I'm disciplined and sometimes I'm not. But the sort of bottom fell out of it about 2 years ago right now, of all of it, right? And what I found myself doing mostly was before I would fall asleep at night on my pillow, I would try to ask for things, right? Intercessory prayer, right? Like, here's what I need, right? But I would start to get in my head about it, like, and maybe this, like, if someone is very sick who you love, like, you're not even sure what to ask for. Do I want this treatment to go well? Do I want it? I want clarity, like, and I just started not even knowing what I was asking for, and so I just started saying, just please. That's it. No ask to it. Just please, God. Right? And just sitting with that and trying to sit with that instead of trying to put language upon what I wanted as if I knew what I wanted or put language on what I needed as if I knew what I needed, just to kind of assume a posture of, I mean, this is maybe not the most popular word, but like supplication, right? Just to assume a posture of just like, I don't know. I'm in this profoundly kind of unstable place where I'm not even sure what I'm asking for. I just know that whatever I need, I can't get it for myself. So please, just please, right? And then things got a little bit better, right, in my life. And I started doing the same thing with thank you, right? Not thank you for this or thank you for that necessarily. although that too, but I found that when I would, and of course I do say thank you for the health of my children and for their beautiful artwork, or for, you know, the kinds of things, the privileges I enjoy. But I would also often, and maybe this is like the self-critical busyness of my mind, I would often find myself immediately starting to be in parenthetical conversation myself and start saying like, well, you only have this because of structural injustice and privilege and other things. And so what about this? And that's not a bad place to go. I mean, as a person who wants to be recognized one's privilege, but it got me away from just feeling grateful, right? And so I just try to kind of, again, cut down that half of my prayer life when the thank yous started coming back, and just try to like settle them into just like a sense of gratitude. And, you know, a year ago now, we entered this pandemic and things got very unstable. But this practice has been one which is stuck with me. And honestly, it's been the most consistent prayer practice. Now I've been doing it for 2 years. It's been the most consistent prayer practice of my life, I think. I mean, over 2 years, the same practice over and over. And it is fairly simple. And it's just usually last thoughts before bed, is trying to get rid of some of that language. Please, I want this. Please, I want this. Please, I want this. And just over time, narrowing that down to just please. And thank you for that. Thank you for that. And just kind of narrow it down to thank you. I do have some slides, which I will try to share in 3 minutes because I think that's my time. But let me see if I can, where is it? Here it is. Okay, so this is the beginning, first slide. Right? This is just a beautiful poem about sort of the sense of gratitude. Poetry is another one of my places, or literature, right? Only a beige slat of sun above the horizon, like a shade pulled not quite down. Otherwise clouds. Sea rippled here and there, birds reluctant to fly. The mind wants a shaft of sun to stir the gray porridge of clouds, an osprey to stitch sea to sky with its barred wings, some dramatic music, a symphony, perhaps a Chinese gong. But the mind always wants more than it has. One more bright day of sun, one more clear night in bed with the moon, one more hour to get the words right, one more chance for the heart in hiding to emerge from its thicket in dried grasses. As if this quiet day with its tentative light weren't enough, as if joy weren't strewn all around. So I had something where I was to talk about Karl Barth a little bit, probably not time in these 10 minutes to talk about Karl Barth, but I will tell you this about Karl Barth, and this quote, which I won't read. The sick there is because of the use of how gender is used in this quotation. Barth said, "We exist by the grace of God," right? The fact of our existence is grace. And the only properly creaturely response to grace is gratitude. And he's actually using like a German pun in his language around that. Between grace and gratitude, there's a common root there, right? We exist by grace. To respond to God is to respond in gratitude. And because we only exist insofar as we properly respond to God, he actually says, to exist properly, we must be grateful. But I also want to think about like the political dangers of this. We'll go quickly, maybe questions and answers, right? You should be grateful, right? This is a thing that I worry about, the political pitfalls of Thanksgiving, right? And when we shouldn't have to ask politely for things that are due us. And so I worry about gratitude, not as a spiritual practice, but as a political practice. And so I also want to think about please as protest. And I get this from a reading of the book of Job that I really like, by an archbishop from my community named Rowan Williams, who talks about Job just being upset with the way his things have gone. And he says that Job, initially in the beginning of the book of Job, Job has two possibilities: either to rationalize his suffering or to be resigned to it, right? But he says actually what emerges is there's a third option, which is protest, is to protest to God that I do not deserve this. I will not be resigned to it. I will not rationalize it. And so I think, at least in our spiritual lives, there's a way in which even when we can't quite describe what we need or what we want, there is something about turning to God, even in the midst of our gratitude, and saying, please, which is also saying, you know, it should not be thus. The world should be other than it is. And even if I am not personally equipped to make the world that, I am turning to you in this pose of supplication, as a sign of how massive the problem is, because it's not mine to fix, but also because you are God. And so here's another poem from the Welsh poet R.S. Thomas. You have no name, we have wrestled with you all day, and now night approaches. The darkness from which we emerge seeking, and anonymous you withdraw, leaving us nursing our bruises, our dislocations. For the failure of language, there is no redress. The physicists tell us your size, the chemists, the ingredients of your thinking, but who you are does not appear, nor why on the innocent marches of vocabulary you should choose to engage us, belaboring us with your silence. We die. We die with the knowledge that your resistance is endless at the frontier of the great poem. Okay, I'll stop my share there and let Tara take over.
Thank you, Matt. It's lovely. I look forward to nourishing those poems later when I get a chance to really sit with them. I feel very humbled to be invited to this circle. I am a counselor, I'm a clinical psychologist at CAMS, and so I thought that I would say a little bit about my story in 1 minute, and then a couple of skills that I feel like are really great practices that I actually teach students all the time, but mostly because they've served me first. So, you teach what you must learn. But, something Matt said just kind of brought to mind. I grew up Catholic, sort of transitioned to the the Unitarian Church when I was raising girls. I really wanted them to go to Our Whole Lives program there for really good comprehensive sex ed. And really actually, don't really kind of fall into any sort of tradition, but I really do love prayer. And so I created as a ritual for myself, as part of really a practice of self-compassion, a prayer that I say every single morning to myself. Sometimes I stand, sometimes I sit. And so I'm just going to say it. It's, I am a wisdom keeper and messenger of compassion. I serve others to shine light and love on their divine gifts. And in doing so, I nurture the highest good in myself and others as we are one. With grace and gratitude, I trust and have faith in a loving, kind, and joyful universe. Simple, I just say it every day as my routine to kind of orient myself to my day. And a number of years ago, it was actually 2016, another sort of significant year in some of our lives, but my daughter was graduating from high school and she was physically assaulted by another girl. And I just did this, like, what happened to kindness? Like, where is it? It's not in our culture. It's not in our politics. It's not in our schools. What happened to it? And so as a researcher, I just started to research kindness, thinking it was something so basic. So I wrote a book called The Kindness Cure, How the Science of Compassion Can Heal Your Heart and Your World. And I came up with, it's actually, I didn't originate with me, but a word that I use, I'll share on my screen here, called kindfulness, which I essentially define as being aware of the present moment with heart. So like gratitude or gratefulness, it's just really an orientation to living versus any one single technique. And so as a mindfulness teacher, I try to kind of really orient language to really bringing in kindness for oneself and for others. So this is just a languaging that I use for myself that helps me anyway. And I also have other language around that, like kind sight, but that will be another talk. But here's what I do, and I just taught it to somebody last hour, so it's fresh on my mind. So it's this really lovely skill called HEAL, and it comes from Rick Hanson, who I consider a mentor of mine. He's written many books, and he really kind of brings in the neuroscience. And one of the things with cultivating an orientation to life that is really kinder and more grateful and appreciative and generous is that we need to practice it. And we need to practice it in such a way that there are constant little repetitions of this. And so his acronym is HEAL. And I love this. I love the word heal, but it's just, notice or have a beneficial experience in your day, whether that arises spontaneously, like the beautiful weather today, or whether it's something that you actually prescribe for yourself because it's nourishing. So a workout might be really hard and you might not like doing it, but it's good for you. So it's not about positivity, right? It's just about really nourishing yourself or nurturing yourself in some way. And then E is enrich it. And this is kind of really bringing in that savoring aspect. Like you stay with it. You want to kind of like pull in all of the senses, sight, touch, sound, the imagery. And a lot of people are kind of good at that, noticing it and then kind of really savoring it. But this next step is sort of the brain hack, if you will. It's just absorbing it into your mind, into your memory banks in whatever way is sustaining. So it's kind of like, for the young people, I say, it's like a mental Instagram. Whatever way that you can really hold on to this beneficial moment as a way that you will remember it. And so it becomes a part of your kind of toolkit, and your practice is so important. And we need to do that because our brains are designed to look for the negative. We just can't help it. It's part of the human design. It's called the negativity bias. And so our minds will always be oriented to the to-do list or the news cycle or something, the paper, the dissertation, you name it. It's we see it as a threat. And so we really have to practice orienting our attention to the things that are beneficial. And the L, Rick says it's really an optional step, but because I guess I'm a psychotherapist, I see it as a necessary step, which is, life is full of suffering. We all suffer. It's part of the human condition. No one kind of goes unscathed. And so we need to just practice linking what has been negative and harmful and traumatic with the present moment experiences, those ordinary kindnesses, those ordinary wonderful things that happen that we might not really pay attention to because our mind's always going to the negative. So this linking is kind of like, it's like kind of like sweetening what's sour. Sometimes I say L is like, making lemons from lemonade. It's not dismissing the negative, but it's saying, wait a minute, this is also here. Can we let this coexist together so that over time, our practices of heal, of kindfulness, of gratitude are really starting to seep in to what has also been real and painful and is a fact in our life. So that's one of the things I like to just teach people. So I share it here with you so that you hopefully will remember it. And then because our brains really need repetition to learn anything and to practice new things, there's another lovely mindfulness practitioner, Donald Altman, and he has this GLAD technique. And what I love about this is it's sort of what Matt was saying before. Sometimes, you can just get rote with things, or, just get intellectual about it. And what I like about this is, and I do this actually with my family when my girls are back from school, is that, I say, okay, everyone pick a letter. So G stands for a gratitude, maybe something simple that happened in your days that you want to name, and it's sort of typically what we think about gratitude. But L I really like because it's what's one thing you learned today? Just a simple, tiny thing that you might not have been aware of. It's come to your attention and you learn something new about yourself or somebody else. And A is a small accomplishment. And I really emphasize the small because so many of us are oriented to like getting big things done, making a big impact. And really it's the small things. So what's one small accomplishment? And then the D is the delight. And I just say, it's whatever brings a smile to your face. So sometimes gratitude and a delight can be the same, but sometimes, there's just no reason. Something brought a smile to your face. And so I usually challenge my family to say, you can't do one of those letters, but it really starts to bring up a discussion. So I really love this skill as a way of doing reps, in a way of really orienting your mind towards that. So those are two little, I just call them brain hacks, and they can just be part of, a social, connection with somebody or something that you do for yourself. And because I'm a scientist, I used to be a research scientist, the research is really proving out ancient wisdom. So all of us that are out there preaching all the good words, the science is really showing that when we practice self-compassion and gratitude, when we practice mindfulness, that we actually change the structure of our brains. And I find this actually really profound. So even 7 days of, listening to an audio of self-compassion actually does start to show some shifts. And we do know from monks and meditators that their brains are really different than the average human being, because they've been sort of really practicing learning to redirect their attention in a different way that actually engages the parasympathetic nervous system, which the normal human being doesn't do, because we're always in stress mode. So the Center for Healthy Minds has the 5-3-1, which is also like another thing that's easy to remember, which is 5 minutes of mindfulness a day. Write down 3 good things that happened and do 1 kind act. So I feel like this is another good little, tool or trick to kind of just really start cultivating the sensibility for gratitude and kindness and compassion. And then the last thing I want to say is, I don't know if anybody knows about the gratefulness.org. Brother David Steindl-Rast, he's Austrian. I think he was born in like the 1920s. And I don't know really who's running his site now, but he has a daily little gratitude thing that goes out in email. And I feel like sometimes we just need to see those reminders to get outside of our own minds so much. So otherwise we're in our own echo chambers all day long. So that's really my share. I want to leave time for discussion so other people can share how what practices that they use, or what's come up for them in any of these presentations today. So thank you.
Thank you both so much. That was beautiful. And I appreciate how both of you managed to both like share such deep practices and also pack so much nuance into those very short presentations. So thank you for that. Yeah, I'd love to just turn it over to folks and pose the same question that Tara posed. What practices do you use? What thoughts, questions do you have to share with the presenters and the folks on this call? Yeah, I see, John, your hand is up.
Well, first, may I put this into practice and thank you, Jen, and thank you, Rachel, for organizing this. Also, Matthew and Tara for your involvement in this. I wanted to suggest something that ties very closely into the GLAD acronym and the 5-3-1. I find it very healthy, just as your head hits the pillow before you conk out, to say out loud 3 things from the last 24 hours for which you're grateful. I can assure you that for those of us in spousal unions or marriages, to say this to each other out loud improves the relationship, makes it deeper and more profound. It will also affect your dreams and your overall well-being. So before you conk out, say, I think it's important to do it out loud. 3 things. And sometimes it's hard to think of 3 things, but that's the discipline also. Thank you all so very much.
I was just thinking, I can add to my things I'm grateful for tonight that I made it to enough of it to understand today.
I think a lot of what Paul shared is, very similar to what Matt and Tara shared. So many of our practices come out of a place of, real necessity when when we're at these very low points that we just don't know what else to do. And it really just sucks. And the tools that we have are not serving us. And so we have to find a way to bridge that gap. And so much of our various religious traditions come out of these like great moments of upheaval structurally and geopolitically too. It seems like that's kind of the necessity often for those catalysts to change ourselves and to change the way that we do things and adapt to our situations. Yeah, Matt.
Yeah, I think I just wanted to kind of sort of say more about you and Paul are both saying, I am Episcopalian, and our prayer tradition tends to be very verbose, very like rote, and very disciplined several times a day, these prayers at this time, right? And I think that from one of the reasons I've struggled in the past with my prayer life is because, and I think this is not unfamiliar Harvard psychology, is like I always want to be really good at it, right? Like I want to pray the right way and the most disciplined way, right? And there was something about hitting this really low spot, where all that collapsed, and all I had the energy at the end of the day to say was just like, please God, right? And kind of letting go of that other stuff was, I think, for me, but like just forcing myself not to try to be good at it, and just to be like, this is just where I am. There was something really important about that. And I hear some of that, what you're saying, Paul, in your comments. I hear some of that kind of feeling resonating in what you said, Paul, and what you said too, Jen.
Thank you so much. And I also just want to say that I so appreciate how both Matt and Tara spoke to these gratitude practices from a place of just really like our basic humanity, right? Please and thank you. feels so, just so intrinsic to like how we are in the world, and heal and glad, like these words that are just so basic that we all kind of are these kind of like ideal, like the ideal default, like that's what we want to be healed, we want to be whole, we want to be happy. So using these like very these very basic building blocks to get ourselves out of those lower places and back to a place of of feeling more like ourselves, and really experiencing the richness of the world around us is so beautiful and so accessible. And I am very grateful to have had the opportunity to learn from both of you and from everyone else who shared. Thank you so much. And thank you for sharing this time with us.